am so excited to dive into today's topic or lesson, the CPR method. I'm not talking about actual CPR, even though that's obviously important too, but I'm talking today about something that will bring your life back into balance and joy with creativity, play, and restoration. And these are three elements that we just often overlook because we are prioritizing like all the things we have to do to get through our day, to make income. And when we forget about things, not only are we more likely to experience burnout, we're more likely to be imbalanced, but we also forget about the thing that actually like creates excitement in our lives. Welcome back to the Becoming You podcast. I'm Rebecca, and I am so excited to dive into today's topic or lesson, the CPR method. I'm not talking about actual CPR, even though that's obviously important too, but I'm talking today about something that will bring your life back into balance and joy with creativity, play, and restoration. And these are three elements that we just often overlook because we are prioritizing like all the things we have to do to get through our day, to make income. And when we forget about things, not only are we more likely to experience burnout, we're more likely to be imbalanced, but we also forget about the thing that actually like creates excitement in our lives. And I discovered this about 2 years ago when I was like, I am just not excited. I'm not excited when I'm looking at my calendar for the next day. I'm not excited about what I have going on in the next week. And I also realized how ungrateful I felt because of the fact that everything that I was doing, I had chosen. And so I had to take radical accountability. And when I, through breathwork, came up with this framework of creativity, play, and restoration and began to infuse my life, my calendar, my days with it, not only have I been so much less burnt out or had many fewer burnout moments, but I feel like I'm living a more harmonious, balanced life. And I've become a better leader in my marriage, in my mothering, and in my business, really in all aspects of my life. So I can tell you from this personal experience that in the past, when I've neglected these areas, burnout was inevitable and often frequent. But when I made that decision to be really intentional with how I brought in creativity and play and restoration into my routine, into my day, it's just been a game changer, not just for personal happiness, but also in my professional pursuits, in my career, in my business, and in my relationships. So let's dive into it. And don't forget, you can download the Balanced Blueprint Workbook. So we'll have all of these exercises in them by texting the word balance to 949-503-9882. Again, that's 949-503-9882. And it might also be somewhere below if you click the link, but this is going to give you the tool to really implement what we're talking about today into your own life. So let's start with big picture is why is this idea of CPR, creativity, play, and restoration, why is it so important? And for me personally, at that point where I had neglected those aspects of my life, I was so focused on productivity. And again, productivity is important, right? But I think we over-focus on it, on getting things done, on keeping up with our commitments. And I just felt like, yes, I was being productive, I was being effective, but I had no time for creativity, play, or rest. And I hit a wall, burnout, and it took over. And looking back, I realized that nearly every time in my life that I've hit burnout, it's because I was not focusing on those CPR activities. And in that moment, in spring of 2022, I said, something has to change. So when I reintroduced those elements, we'll talk through, everything began to shift. Suddenly I was more energized. My relationships were stronger. My work felt more fulfilling. And it's because creativity literally lights the path. It lights the path to new solutions, new possibilities, new neural networks or brain networks. And it also helps us because it makes us literally look at things differently, feel differently, think differently. And then play. Play is a beautiful way to release stress. Play, again, energizes us. And then restoration gives us that peace and calm that we need to recharge because we can't be creative, but we can't be playing all of the time. We do need rest and restoration. And again, you're talking to a ADD, Enneagram 7 who has a short sleep gene. So I will say, I wish it hadn't taken me 44 years to realize how important restoration is. But now that I've realized it, I can recharge. And that creativity, that play, that restoration, they're essential, not just for joy, but for balance or harmony, for being an effective leader in our own lives. And that starts with leading ourselves and for a life full of passion. So starting with the C in cultivating creativity, how do we start this, right? The first step is to really look at not just that creativity is making art or doing something crafty, is to really redefine what does creativity look like and feel like for us. So this is about sparking new ideas. It's about approaching life with curiosity. It's about thinking outside of the box. There's a reason that as children, everything seems exciting. And also life goes slow. If you remember as a child, you think about how long is it to Christmas or how long is it to summer break? And it feels like it's eons away. And as adults, time goes so fast. And it's often because we're not doing new things. We're not doing things that feel creative, that feel like they're sparking curiosity. So when I sat down and did this, I literally had to ask myself, what makes me feel creative? And I'll tell you, I literally asked ChatGPT, here's my personality. What can I do to become creative? Because I was so detached from my own creativity. I actually had told myself a story for years that I'm not a creative person. And I kind of laugh at that now because I just didn't feel like, well, I'm not an artist or I'm not a singer, so I'm not a creative. Now, I will say at that time, I used to tell myself that I do business in a creative way. However, the thing that you do for work, even if it's a creative outlet, don't allow this to be all of your creative outlets. So I wrote down a list, and many of these things were things I was not actively doing. And we will dive into how to actually build this into your time and your schedule with actions. But I thought, when I go to the farmer's market, when I'm in Europe, right, I feel like that's so creative. When I craft new recipes out of these things that are in season and local, when I make floral arrangements, which I've never taken a class of it. This could be like buying flowers at Trader Joe's or at the farmer's market and just deciding, what am I going to put together? What vase am I going to choose? Where am I going to put it in my home? Making playlists. I had never made a playlist in my life. And when I started, when I was certified in hypnobreathwork and I had to create playlists, it wasn't just, what do I want to listen to while I drive or while I clean out my closet? But it was really like, how do I create something that feels like cinematic, like almost like a movie? It's taking people through different emotions and really through a formula to get a result. I actually want to share last night. Last night I was at a football game, which was fun. It felt like play more than creativity. And I was chatting with another Enneagram 7 and she was telling me about some things she does in her local area. And I was like, oh my goodness, burlesque dance or roller derby. Some of these things were creative. Some felt like play or just fun. So literally tonight, I am doing my first burlesque dance class. I signed up for I think 10 workshop series with a showcase and everything. And that feels creative to me, is like dance, right? I start a songwriting class tomorrow night. Obviously right now I'm in a season of really intentionally infusing creativity and play into my life, but designing decor, whenever I either doing a remodel or I bought an investment property and I'm redesigning it, I look at this itch I get, and it usually is about 2 years after I finish a project. When I finish, I'm like, I am tapped out. I'm done. And a year or two later, sure enough, like I start feeling that itch again to want to create something else. And so what for you is creativity? What makes you feel creative? What makes you feel curious? Right? And it is great if it can be something physically with your hands or something that you're actually creating something you can look at. One thing I will say that I had to really do is look at what is creative outside of my computer, because I write and I develop playlists, but all of these things are in the computer. So what can you do physically that is using your body or your senses that is also creative? What ignites that creativity? What lights you up? Again, painting, writing, even cooking, this could be a one-time thing. It could be a class you take. It could be a workshop. It could be something that you want to like actually build into a craft, but make a list of everything that you feel creative doing. And you don't have to be good at it. That's the thing. This is not about turning this into a money-making hobby, into a side hustle. This is just what feels creative. And once you've identified those creative sparks, the next step is to look at incorporating these creative rituals into your life. And we'll go into this more in the next episode or lesson of the non-negotiable navigator. But when you look at these rituals, these don't have to be big time-consuming things. It could be something as simple as setting 10 minutes aside to journal if that feels creative, to take a walk and let your mind wander. For me, when I go to the farmer's market, it's a little bit longer than 10 minutes. It's also part of my play routine. But when I get home, I spend about 10 minutes making flower arrangements. I usually make 2 or 3. And that is my creative time. Understand that overcoming creative blocks can be tough if you do feel blocked. So again, try those little creative things like listening to music. Right before I sat down to record this, I was changing my clothes and I was listening to Bigger Than by Justin Susso, I think it is. And I'm like, oh, sometimes just listening to great music makes me feel creative. Maybe it's doodling. Maybe it's dancing. Maybe it's walking in nature. I always know if I listen to something inspirational and then do any movement. So that could look like going to a workout class with a really great playlist or instructor that's like shouting inspiration or motivational thoughts at me, or it's being in nature, listening to a great podcast. Figure out what works for you and make space for it in your daily or your weekly routine. Also, lastly, understand these things can change. So the things that you might feel creative right now in this season of life or this like literal physical season can change. So review this quarterly, at least yearly, and look at what is making me feel creative now. Okay, number 2, prioritize play. This is the second part of the CPR method is play. And as adults, I think we often forget how important it is to play. But play is what helps us set up to unwind, to rediscover joy. I look at my children and my daughter will come into the house, literally take her shoes off, and she does one of 2 things, almost always. She either goes straight to pulling out her art supplies, so that's maybe creative and play for her, or she goes straight to building Legos and she just builds Legos like nobody's business. And she loves the creativity during her playtime of going to the big Lego box and just building random things. Where my son, his play, he has to like build kits. He wants a specific outcome that he can work towards. So think about, what does play look like for you? What activity makes you lose track of time? Maybe it's hiking, it's dancing, it's playing an instrument. I love playing board games with my kids. We play board games weekly, sometimes even daily. Tonight, again, the burlesque class, it's both creativity and play. So whatever it is, make play a priority. This weekend, I'm doing our 3rd escape room with my kids. My husband's like, yeah, maybe in like 5 years. I'm like, why not take my 5-year-old who can't read? She can look for visual clues, and my 8-year-old who can read the clues. I love it. So that's play, and they love it. And that's our thing now, right? Is doing escape rooms, the 3 of us. But what I recommend is, 1, come up with what feels fun. And you can look at activities you've done before, but you can also look at when you're looking at other people I'm not saying go down the scroll hole and compare, but look at what activities are you like, gosh, that seems so cool, or that seems so fun, or who are people you admire? And this is not to try to compare or compete, but often we have people that we admire because they're doing the things that we're doing, or they're doing the things that we want to do, but we've never given ourselves permission for. And then schedule it in. Literally look at your calendar and find a block this week where you can do something that's for fun. It doesn't have to be a big commitment. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 20 minutes, but make sure you're setting aside that time to laugh and be silly and to enjoy yourself, right? Don't just plug into the screens, like unless you're watching something that makes you laugh out loud, but still be careful of how much you're doing that. Do something in your real life, because play isn't just for kids. It's really about reducing that stress. It's about bringing more joy into our life. And no one ever sat on their deathbed and said, I wish I would have worked more, right? They wish they would have played more. And then the step 3 is embracing restoration, the R. We live in this world that really glorifies hustle, constant productivity, but the truth is that restoration is what allows us to keep going. And we need that time to rest and recharge and restore our energy. So think about what activities leave you feeling truly refreshed, like peaceful, like restored. You can also download an app like I love Rise Sleep to make sure you're catching up on your sleep, because it is hard if you are, habitually sleep deprived to feel this. But also, what activities energetically allow this? So maybe it's yoga or meditation, breath work, a walk in nature. I love reading a book, a good book. But identify those restorative practices and make them a non-negotiable part of your routine. You don't have to do a bath every day, right? If that's it for you. If it's like the bath salts, that ritual, by the way, could also feel like creativity if you really get bougie with it. But what are those activities that make you feel restored? and create your restoration rituals. For me, reflexology, I try to do it once a week. I love it. I usually take a nap during it, and that's totally okay. But set up those times in your week where you dedicate yourself to these activities. And that could be Sunday evening meditation. Sometimes actually restoration for me is like looking at everything the week ahead and ensuring that I'm not going to run into any fires. Like I'm firefighting in advance. Or maybe it's a quiet time before bed that you're not on screens, that you're listening to 528 megahertz or a meditation, but protect that time, right? Restoration is vital to our well-being, and it really helps us show up fully for everything else in our life. So now we've gone through all the CPR, you understand each part of them. Let's talk a little bit about how to integrate them into your life. So here's the tip: find where they overlap. Some of these activities will hit multiple parts. I remember walking my husband through this, and I literally was writing it down for him, and I was just asking him out loud because he doesn't necessarily love to sit down and do an exercise like I do, but he will talk through it and I can do it for him. And I asked him, I was like, what feels creative to you? He said, well, like we have a property that's off the grid. And he's like, I love being there and like building things, hooking up water, solar, like doing these projects that are not as fun for me. I said, okay, what feels like play? And he went through the things that feel like play, like going to a concert with friends or, meeting up with his guy friends. They brew beer together. And also going back to our property off the grid. I said, what feels like a restoration? And often for him, it was a jog or it was journaling and it was going to that property. So I looked and I was like, wait, that property, like working on it feels like creativity, play, and restoration. So how can you prioritize more of this? That's a huge reason that we moved from this home here in Palo Alto to Carmel, is it was closer to that property. So we could get there every single week instead of once a month. So for me, travel is a huge part of this. Travel planning to me is creativity. And then also I can do things while traveling that are creative. But then the actual travel is both play and restoration. So I looked at these activities in my life of like, well, which of these can I do? Traveling with female friends on anything that's kind of spiritual absolutely hits every one of these categories. I feel like I come back the best version of myself. I come back restored, creative, and I have had so much fun. So look at where they overlap. And again, meditation could be restorative. When I do meditation and breath work, it's not only restorative, but I also feel very creative because all kinds of ideas come to me. So look for the ones that you have two categories at once: time and nature. And last, be really intentional about your planning. Look at your calendar and find spaces where you can include creativity or play or restoration throughout the day, the week. Remember, done meets perfect. But the more that you do this regularly, the more that you're going to see this significant shift in how you feel and how you lead, how you show up in your life. So thank you for joining me for our episode, our lesson on CPR. And I'm really hoping that you feel more inspired, that you're able to bring in more creativity and play and restoration into your life. And we're just getting started, right? Next, we're going to be talking about the non-negotiable navigator, which is literally a framework on how to identify and prioritize these things that matter most, how to balance the commitments that you can't miss to the habits that bring you the most joy. And that episode is going to give you some really tactile tools to ensure your days are just full of what really matters. And remember, go and get the full Balanced Blueprint Workbook. It includes the worksheets so you can plan this out and you're not just doing it in your head, but you're actually putting pen to paper and you're bringing this magic into your calendar, into your days, into your life. And you can get that by texting the word balance to 949-503-9882.